take buses and trains while waiting at bus stops or trying to find cars. State children for any suspicious behavior, gay activity, or return disturbances, and any other crimes in the safety department.
Good evening, everyone. Alright, welcome to Pleasant Evenings Book Club. It's a literary podcast where we read and then do a podcast. My name's Roberto. I'm joined here today by Hannah.
Hey.
And Corbin.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
It's like that, very professional, thank you.
Yeah.
No, it's good. We're get this NPR pattern.
Yeah. Our
this
correspondent in the field.
It was so cool.
Oh,
we have to have Corbin doing man on the street interviews.
Yeah.
Just investigative book club journalism.
Right. What do you think of The King in Yellow? Have you seen the yellow sign? Sorry.
Yeah, so this week, the people who know will know this week, or I guess the people that look at the title will know, we're doing Robert W. Chambers this week. We're reading The Repair of Reputations and The Mask from his short story collection, The King in Yellow.
Do you want to go into like any sort of introductory details about that? So obviously this was in direct influence of H.P. Lovecraft. It's pretty well documented. But beyond that, it was written in 1895, or rather published in 1895, and it's a collection of short stories. My understanding is that despite there being, 10 stories in the book, only the first 4 or so are considered the relevant part relative to, sort of what's considered the mythological King in Yellow. That's the eponymous. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's called the Carcosa Mythos. Speaking of influence on Lovecraft, I'm not gonna say the first, but this was an early thing in the weird tradition of mythos, or having something to call mythos.
Right, and this definitely sets quite a precedent for the things that would later become sort of that weird fiction genre. It's got all the hallmarks, and having read Lovecraft first, I definitely feel like you can see what he has stolen, not in a bad way, of course, but
a fake book that's a real book.
Yeah,
there's shades of Necronomicon.
Oh yeah, and of course the book causes madness, of course. But
what else
I like this, though, because the name of the book that you read is the name. There was never a Lovecraft book called the Necronomicon. Obviously, that's, that's pretty clear.
There's a fandom thing.
Right. You can hold a copy of The King in Yellow, at least relative to, books that you can own. So, but yeah, I guess there's the Simon Necronomicon, but that's for a different podcast.
That doesn't count in this.
Yeah.
Let's say.
It doesn't count, yeah, right.
The little fun fact about Chambers, looking into it, when Lovecraft wrote about him, he's saying he showed a promise. He had a couple of good stories, but then he went into an unfortunate direction, and I was wondering what that was. Apparently, so he does this. He blazes this trail in weird fiction and supernatural horror, and in the back half of his career, he mostly wrote romances.
I sort of I thought that the second half of this book even sort of leaned more into that, but
that's
the Mask. I saw tones of that.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I really liked those elements in The Mask. I thought that, in fact, that's the reason that some of the later books in the collection were less had less to do with the King in Yellow, the character, was because they were more like romances. I have a summary here. An atmospheric tale of an artist in Paris who is drawn to a neighbor's room by a cat. is one of the stories. It's called The Street of the Four Winds. You see what I'm saying? It's
Hmm.
yeah. There's a story towards the end called The Street of Our Lady of the Fields, about a romantic American bohemians in Paris. You know, this is just from Wikipedia, but I guess our plan had just been to read the King in Yellow sort of stories. You know what I mean? The ones that are sort of linked, but who knows? We could explore the rest. It's certainly within reach.
Yeah, I like his style. Like I guess we broke the seal on it. Like the mask.
Yeah,
Like you think it's gonna go like really dark, but it stays in this like dreamy like gothic romance kind of space.
oh yeah. I thought that was a really beautiful story.
And albeit for as a romance, it was still dark too. Like it still maintained a tragedy of
Mhm.
poor Boris. Like
I feel like
Yeah.
any good romance has to have some tragedy, right? So, but
Yeah.
that's true.
And
yeah.
like coming in from like where he's like whatever like his background, right? Like he is like this comes out in 1894. So like he's not too far removed from like the Brontes
Right.
or Shelley.
Or Crowley for that matter. I was noticing, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But
Like Dracula came out pretty Dracula's more straight horror.
right.
Yeah, so it could have gone in either direction. Also, like coming off of, like I guess we'll jump into the story soon. Let's say on the mask, like coming off of Repair of Reputations too. When the King in Yellow story comes out like I was ready for like hell to break loose.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I was drawn in. Did you guys read the poem at the beginning? Do you guys have that in your copies of this?
I think in my copy it's like untranslated French.
It was in French for me as well.
Oh, really? Okay. It's on Wikipedia. I can read it. So somehow it rhymes in a. Oh! At the beginning of the Repair of Reputations. I mean, at the very beginning of the book, there's a poem.
Oh,
In the epigraph.
I don't have one of those in mine.
Oh, okay. I can read it. It's on Wikipedia too, if you guys want to pull it up. But I have it in my book as well. I thought it was funny though. I couldn't. It to me it sounds like Frank Sinatra lyrics in the funniest way because it's a okay. It's along the shore the cloud waves break, the twin sun sinks beneath the lake, the shadows lengthen in Carcosa. Strange is the night where black stars rise and strange moons circle through the skies, but stranger still is lost Carcosa. Songs that the Hyades shall sing, where flap the tatters of the king, must die unheard in dim Carcosa. Song of my soul, my voice is dead, die thou unsung, as tears unshed shall dry and die in lost Carcosa. And that's supposed to be from the actual King in Yellow play. It's
Wow, that is beautiful.
Casilda's song in The King in Yellow, Act 1, Scene 2, which is, of course, a fictional book, so, it's interesting to get those little glimpses.
Yeah.
I like the inserts of them during the stories themselves, too.
Yeah, I'm
no.
sure that there's people that have taken a crack at it, at, like, fleshing out the stuff in between, but those little glimpses are very well rendered.
Right, and I don't know that I'd like to see the stuff in between. I think it's better as these sort of surreal, disjointed sort of scenelets. It'd be hard. I feel like anything else would like amount to fan fiction in a way.
Yeah, straight. Yeah,
but that's maybe just I don't know.
Extended canons.
Right. Well, I guess in this area, there's a lot of that. You know what I mean? Like, essentially, like all of Lovecraft's followers were just expanding his canon. And
he invited people to write in the mythos.
Right. So to be very within the spirit of this scene, they all reference each other. You know what I mean? I think even Carcosa, if I recall correctly, is not Chambers's. But let me try to verify that.
Yeah, it was some other guy.
Ambrose Bierce.
Ambrose Bierce. That's a guy for a future book club.
Yeah, I don't know who that is, but we should check him out based on that. His book, The Devil's Dictionary, was named one of the 100 greatest masterpieces in American literature by the American Revolution Bicentennial Administration. Wow. I think with a lot of these guys, there's just some liking of the word, you know? Like, Carcosa to me has never actually called to mind like a forbidden city. It just to me sounds like a place in Spain or something, you know? I think they just like the word. Yeah.
There's like
Carcosa.
there's like a tropical
Yeah.
vibe to it.
Yeah, it does sound a little tropical.
I guess there's water imagery. I was gonna say it makes me think of a beach, but they mention a lake.
Where did you all picture that place as taking place at Carcosa?
With that poem, like it could be anywhere. Like I could even like believe it's in some kind of dream world, or
Right.
like Middle Earth. Like with the twin suns.
The aesthetic that I think I've been conditioned to like ascribe to this is probably something just like Irithyll of the Boreal Valley. You know what I mean? That's just how I envision it. Is like sort of like a shadowy city of twin suns and like a Gothic architecture.
Those buttresses are flying for sure.
Right. I think it's just a direct predecessor, though, actually, to like what is it, Lovecraft's sunken Rielia? Is that how you say it? Yeah. I don't know. I guess just non-Euclidean geometry, whatever that means, and two suns and just a vague dreamy spookiness is kind of how I was piecing it together.
Yeah, like the Dark Souls thing. Like also like the King in Yellow is like the biggest deal, but like he's dressed in tatters for some reason.
Yeah, that's very Dark Soulsy too. I feel like everything we talk about touches on Dark Souls, but I think that speaks more to us than to literature. But,
Yeah, not obviously like I'm guessing Hidetaka Miyazaki. Like I know he's a fan of Lovecraft.
Oh, he'd have to be because of
Bloodborne.
blood. Yeah, right.
So it's probably all over. But I mean, that's such a like the vibe of like that that solemn like decay.
Right.
That fallen kingdom.
Ooh, Angel Egg is another film that we watched, or another piece of media rather that we consumed, I guess, relative to this conversation that had that sort of vibe. I don't know. I definitely imagine some architecture where we are. You know what I mean? Definitely, so, as you said, there's definitely buttresses, and they're definitely flying. Like
Repair of reputations. I'm gonna pull the trigger. Get us in on into the story. Do you want to try, Corbin?
For repair of reputations?
No.
Yeah, I'll try it out. So, how does it open? It opens, giving us for us historic, but for Chambers at this time, it was what the future United States looked like. And to give a gross summary, Manifest Destiny is achieved, and this version of the United States achieves this great prosperity. Now, I don't quite know why it happens in this United States, but the government had decided to legalize and sanction suicide.
Yeah. Right. I guess like influenced Lovecraft and also Futurama.
Yeah, Suicide Chambers.
Exactly.
That's exactly what I thought it was, Futurama.
Yeah, it came right to mind. Yeah,
and it's in this New York City that we're introduced to our main character.
It's Hildred, I think. It's something that does not ring like a name. Yeah, Hildred. Yeah.
We're introduced to some of his background. He is recently released from an asylum from Dr. Ambers?
Yeah.
Who was convinced that he had gone insane after pinning his head falling off this horse. Hildred is not convinced of that. And, he thinks he's sane, but that after falling off this now dead horse, that he has ignited this ambition to become the next king of the United States. And apparently there's a whole long imperial lineage. And in order for him to obtain the crown, he has to convince his cousin, Louis, to step down from that, because the current heir in his mind is Louis. And in doing so, partners with the repairer of reputations, whose name is Wilfred, I think.
Classic sane people shit, I just want to say. Totally sane,
Right?
classic sane people shit.
Yeah, no.
You know, me and the boys just being sane on a Tuesday, right?
Yeah, like he's got like a mentor kind of relationship with this crazy guy that just like lives alone with a cat.
With this feral cat too that claws his face and attacks this poor old man, this poor old mentor.
Right? They described like it's not just like that the cat's bad. It's like the guy, like at least he's described by our narrator as like he likes to like taunt the cat and like provoke it into attacking him.
It's almost as though he likes it. Like this.
I
This
mean,
is playtime.
he's got no fingers, it should be noted, so he's clearly a masochist.
Yeah, he's got no fingers.
Okay.
He's got 2 fake ears.
Yeah. Maybe he just wants to be able to feel something with what he's got left, you know?
Yeah, just a bit of a adrenaline rush after losing your ears.
Like what a character! Like if you want to wrap up, maybe we'll like go back. Like he's described as like such a weird guy.
Yeah.
Right.
So these two, mind you, perfectly sane in their view, people begin to initiate the overthrow of King-to-be Louis by attempting to kill his fiancée and
Right, like
I don't quite know what their next steps were going to be after that, but
I love how vague it gets as it goes, yeah.
ultimately the fiance Louis survives. The feral demonic cat ends up killing the mentor figure at the end, and we see our narrator ultimately being arrested by the police and brought out in chains with tears from the cousin's fiance. And that's my gross summary.
Right, yeah, it should be noted. I guess we didn't like touch on that in the summary. It should be noted the reason that like it's mentioned that our friend Hildred has read The King in Yellow, you know, and that this has been a major event for him, you know. He seems to have some like anxieties relating to it, and all of these thoughts he has about you know, this prophecy he thinks he's fulfilling are sort of tied to what's contained in The King in Yellow. You know, at least according to him. So that's how this ties into this story, in case that wasn't mentioned. But
I was confused by that initially because I was distracted by this falling off of a horse.
Yeah, no, he fell off a horse, and then like after his hospitalization, or like during his hospitalization, that's where he found the book. But either way, he's not into writing anymore.
yeah.
There is a sense, like there's a sense of like an almost like spiritual like break or delusion for this character. Like he decides like he was just like a layabout, someone who just like go around town, and he became more ambitious after his accident.
Right. Yeah.
But it seemed like he had like before like getting really into The King in Yellow, Um, he seemed to have like emotional connections. Like he seemed to be really close to his cousin Louis, which, by the way, like what a nice guy. Like it really felt like cousin Louis cared about him.
Yeah, poor cousin Louis. I think the most horrifying thing in this book was like the cringe I felt like watching an insane person interact with somebody who literally just wants like their well being. Like, I was like, oh, like
Yeah.
this is hard. Like, I didn't realize it was going to be this kind of horror.
Yeah, so okay, yeah, so clarifying like the way he went insane with the King in Yellow is that like there's an implied mythology with the King in Yellow being at the top of some kind of hierarchy. And Mr. Wilde had written a document called like the History of the Imperial Dynasties of America. So when Hildred goes to Mr. Wilde's office, his house, he goes straight to this document and he goes through the lineage from Carcosa and the Hyades,
Esther and the Hyades. Yeah.
like eventually going down to him and his cousin.
I wanted to ask, unless you had a
Mhm.
thought. How do we feel going back to, I guess, Mr. Wilde, right? How do we feel about the fact that he seems to be a little bit right about some things? Right?
Yeah.
Because there's this whole subplot that we haven't really touched on yet, where Leo's wife, his name is Leo, right? His cousin Lewis's wife, or wife to be, yeah, is I guess the daughter, is it, of a blacksmith that lives below Mr. Wilde? Is that am I understanding?
Yeah, an
the relationship
armorer.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. And he I guess has like an eye for like rare suits of armor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my understanding is that the Hildred, the narrator, pays them, a visit pretty often because he's this sort of like weird, like he's a little envious of his cousin over
Constance, maybe.
there. Yeah. That's clear just from the way he talks about her. I guess they never like lean into it very heavily, but it's pretty clear.
And I mean, by then too, he's already in on like this like Game of Thrones secession intrigue in his own head too.
Right. And so it seems like he'll kind of go over there and just to see me, under the guise of sort of like hanging out really quick before he goes up to see Mr. Wilde, and he'll just sort of like, I don't know, say weird shit to them that he thinks is maybe impressing them, but then he also says like stuff like, I don't know, like Mr. Wilde has no need for your money and things like that. But one of the things that he does is he tells the armorer, whose name Hauberk,
Mm-hmm.
of the location, like very specifically of like the arm piece, I think it is, of like a rare and treasured set of armor. And he's like, yeah, it's just in the dump, like 20 minutes from here. You just get on the subway. You'll be there in no time, And it ends up being correct. And I don't know what's, there's a lot of like, in Lovecraft's work, for example, like if I were to contrast, right, any ambiguity that is presented, like the horror is not in the ambiguity. It's in that the person that's experiencing the ambiguity is like trapped with their reality of it, Whereas, like, when I read this, I'm like, what is going on? Like, is this real? Is this fake? Like, there's no actual truth to, like, whether or not the King in Yellow is at play here because of that single fact that, like, somehow this Mr. Wilde knows the exact location of a rare suit of armor, like one missing piece that has been missing for seemingly, generations or something? I feel like there was a brief history.
Like centuries.
Yeah. The Princess Emblazoned, I guess, is the suit of armor. So I
think it does a really cool job with the ambiguity there. In that, like, I think like one thing, I think that's one of the ways that the near future aspect of it makes everything wonky. Once you're in the not present real life, like, more things are like to the reader are possible. Like,
Yeah, that's true.
but there is room. Like, these people do love, Hildred. Like, Louis is very patient with his madness, so it's possible they're just like they're just going along with what he says.
Oh, like, hey, buddy, I went there and I did find that piece of armor you were talking about. Thanks for the help.
Yeah.
Well, is that
There's
is that
room
helpful?
for that? Well, when someone's in a psychotic break, you're not supposed to tell them that they're crazy. I mean, you saw.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because then they'll be more resistant to help.
Oh, yeah, that follows.
I mean, you can
fair
see how
point.
Hildred, like, all of this speaks to how it might be true, that Hildred is very sensitive to people thinking he's crazy. Like,
Right.
he hates that word. Whenever Louis says anything that implies that they don't believe him, like, he notably, like, he makes a point to,
Right.
like, be offended by that.
Yeah, I guess what I'm really teasing at is that like in the Lovecraft stories I've read, the world in the novel or in the story might think that the narrator's insane, but you don't. Here, I'm not so sure he is sane.
Yeah.
You know, like the whole thing is like wholly more flibbity flobbity. You know, like
Yeah.
like I
Even,
feel the
like,
way the
there's
world feels about him. Go ahead.
There is another layer where you could say like any like any state hierarchy like takes some form of madness. Another layer is that there's just like enough crazy people that like Mr. Wilde has a lot of people that he has influence over. So like maybe he just has a lot of, so it's possible that Mr. Wilde just like has access to like what all these people tell him are in each dumpster and stuff.
Well, but I guess following up on that, what are we to make of his influence? Like, if this guy really has some kind of influence, he can't be that mad, right? I mean, I guess barring the Donald Trumps of the world, but like, it just seems like the way people fall all over him.
Yeah.
I mean, they provide like a real example. I mean, isn't there a guy that essentially murders someone for him towards the end there?
There's two guys. It turns out he didn't follow through with it.
Oh shit.
Because at the end you see Constance and Hauberk.
Oh yeah.
But even before that, when he's talking about his repair of reputations business, like someone knocks on the door, and Mr. Wilde like yells at him.
Well, I get the impression that Mr. Wilde is an old man, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, just by having enough time, he could have a network of people that has his back.
Yeah, there was that one scene too, where he's out on the street and like a homeless beggar like comes up and he gives him some money, and then another one comes up and doesn't have money, so he gives him like a piece of paper with the yellow sign on it, and
the beggar looks at it, not quite sure what to do.
I think he folds it. Does he like fold it up and put it in his pocket like it's really important?
Yeah. Like,
TBH, that would be exactly what I would do. I'd be like, oh fuck, like this is a powerful hex. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, wise man.
I would bow probably.
Yeah, so like who knows how many people, like he says he's got a lot of people in his employ, and then like maybe there's some truth when he says that we'll have 5,000 people rise up, and then by the next day 20,000 might even be a bigger number.
Right.
Like who knows how many people.
That part tripped me out. Yeah, that was also very Donald Trumpy, where it was like, look at the size of my crowd. Nobody has a bigger crowd than me. I didn't believe any of that. To be fair, like I'm so on the fence as to what I think about any of these people. You know, I guess Lewis and Constance and Hauberk are all pretty set in stone. But
yeah, there's a degree, like it could just be like the sheer power of this book to drive people crazy. And then the scary thing is, like, what if enough people went crazy in a coordinated enough way?
Right, to actually bring in the reign of the King in Yellow or what have you.
Yeah. Like,
Right.
it's not too far from QAnon people thinking that Robert Kennedy's gonna come back, right? Like,
Yeah,
any minute.
there is a certain like modern day. Yeah, I'm glad we teased this out because when I first read the story, I didn't see a whole lot in it. But like when we talk about things like that, it's kind of like, oh,
Yeah, I know this is a
But
stretch, but like I thought it was so weird about the near future thing. Like because of the time, I'm not sure how the writer felt about it, but he's basically describing um America's basically like a Prussia style like military like police state. Like talking about their colonial conquests, how the Cuban and Hawaii investments paid off.
something about the exclusion of foreign-born Jews really stuck with me. I mean, I don't know if we can say that
Now
on
we know
YouTube,
why
but maybe.
we know why Lovecraft was such a fan.
Right? Yeah, you love that. There was something else that I thought was racist.
Oh yeah, like the black people colony or something. Like he said, like all the black
Yeah, it
people
was a
were like in
country,
Suwannee.
like made up a
Yeah.
country. I don't. Swanee's not like a real place, right? Before I get canceled, like.
No, it's something that shows up in like that period of racism. I'm not sure what Swanee's in reference to, but I know like that's a song in Porgy and Bess.
Well, let's maybe do some research on this before we decide to keep or unkeep what we talk about here in this particular segment.
Yeah, either way, it's just a reference to the racism of the time.
Yeah, they're all racist. You know this. Everybody knows this.
Yeah, I was doing some research about this. It turns out Robert Chambers might have been anti-Semitic in real life, but it seems like such a wild
Yeah, something
thing.
about the exclusion of.
Foreign-born Jews. But
Right, yeah.
it seems like such a wild thing that I would believe it too if that's like meant to be some kind of, like satire.
That's a good point. I mean, honestly, that's.
I mean, the characters like Louis, of course, he's in the army, but Hildred, like they seem to be proud of the idea of having a strong state. Like, there's also that
Right.
line of like the world like was crumbling and America stood above everything.
I guess to ask rather brutally, what was the deal with those suicide chambers? Like,
Oh yeah, I guess
I thought
we
we-
should get on that again.
I thought they would play a much bigger deal in the story, but it was just part of the background.
That's part of.
I love it. I kind of love it.
If we're gonna go into the thing, as satire of a certain like, political mindset or whatever, like they talk about like clearing out the Italians from that neighborhood, and like, oh, now they got rid of the Italians. What? How about a place where you can kill yourself?
Right. Like this society is just about removing undesirables entirely. Oh shit! Duh. That's. So this story about mental illness features a society that removes undesirables entirely. Like there it is.
There's that moment too where like they describe the guy as having a weird shaped head. It's like the type of head that you'll see in people like in the Insane or something. Like there's a weird like what's the name of that pseudoscience where you take the calipers on people's heads? Phrenology.
Oh god. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
And yeah, like part of the plan was like when they have that guy Vance. Oh, that's another thing I guess to talk about is like just like talking about like the way he builds the scenes. Like he walks in, he's looking for the cat and doesn't find him, and then Mr. Wild tells Vance to come out, and he apparently was just in the shadows the whole time.
Yeah. Right. Like he was looking around the room and he just like looked right over him or something.
Like,
I mean, you're looking for a cat, not Vance.
Yeah, that's not a cat. That's
selective
Vance.
blindness.
That's the problem.
he was really after that cat. Those scenes are so funny. Like when he's like trying to hit the cat to like, he's like, that's it. I'm killing the cat, and like he breaks a cane trying to hit him.
I had wondered if
Yeah.
he were that crazy, was the cat him like externalize, or is that
Like the ending where he comes in to like where he thinks it's all done because he sent Vance to kill Constance and Mr. Hauberk.
yes?
Right, and then he gets Louis to say he renounces the crown.
What am I renouncing again? I love that line.
Oh,
Louis is such a good character.
What a guy. He's like,
Right.
yeah, okay, I renounce it. And then he sees out of the corner of his eye Vance like rush into the suicide chamber. And he's like, oh, it's done. Which I don't think it was like established that would be part of the plan, but maybe it's cleaner that way.
Right.
Um,
I think my favorite part about that whole interaction between him and Louis is like the way that he makes him read the whole fucking like the whole fucking document, and then he just like looks at him like, okay,
yeah.
and like, right. I think that's the first moment where I start to like be sure that dude is insane. I was like, oh, okay, so there's nothing here.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
There is that one moment. Like Louis' response seems to be just like, "Oh damn, my cousin he's out of it. Like he really needs help." But earlier when he brings up to Constance and Mr. Hauberk about their real identities, like they seem troubled by it in a different way. Going back to like what's how
Like, oh shit, he's right.
yeah.
is there some of that? I must not have picked up on that.
Like they talk about like Constance's
Oh, no.
face going into like showing some kind of distress.
Well, I guess they were fugitives, is what he
Like-
was accusing them of.
Oh, right. Yeah, I mean they're like he's part of the reason why Louis' marriage to Constance would be a problem is because it would bring England into the whole mess.
Yes.
But yeah, I think like he says like some like,
Damn,
but like who knows
we
like
can't get the British involved.
Not again.
Right. Yeah, not again. Yeah.
oh yeah, he did some
Exclusion of sorry, foreign born.
um right, but anyways, like Vance runs in, he gets Louis to renounce the crown. Like he starts running out, and also Constance's out of the picture. Now Louis like, like they're both racing to the place, but he runs right past where Hauberk and Constance would be, and he goes into Mr. Wilde's place. He goes in like just to grab his crown and some silk robes, and like he kills a cat with his knife, or like he says like he hears some scurrying and stuff. Like I wonder if there's room for Hildred to have accidentally stabbed Mr. Wilde.
That's what I thought was possible, yeah. That or Vance.
Oh yeah, like Vance just like had a snap. That's true because like Mr. Wilde like has this thing with the cat, but he also is so mean to all these people that do everything he says. And every time he mentions it, Hildred is like, "Oh, aren't you afraid they'll assassinate you or they'll kill you one of these days?"
Yeah.
He does say that.
So yeah, who knows? Like there might have been a whole other like melodrama happening while he was with Louis.
He's associated with so many people. Who's to say?
That's an interesting story. I thought it was like a really fun read, and like
Oh yeah, really.
but like the way
I really enjoyed it.
I think there's something like the Master Wild is also such an interesting character. Like the way that he's mean to everyone, the way he's mean to the cat.
Right. I almost feel like he could have been utilized more effectively before his death.
Yeah, there's definitely
Like
potential.
one more big Mr. Wild blowout, and then and let the cats have him.
Yeah, I think there's something to it, like in their sense of grandeur. Yeah, I mean
Right.
they're definitely greedy. Like they're gonna serve the king, but they're gonna be getting. It seems like the entire continent, no, the hemisphere.
Right. the whole hemisphere just for them. It's so dope. Totally normal thoughts. Totally normal thoughts that normal people have.
I think you had mentioned Crime and Punishment before. I mean, the way these characters interact is very reminiscent of Russian literature.
Like in the dialogue, or
Just in the dialogue and in their presented their psyches, I guess. They're well crafted.
yeah, for sure. Like I think they have like very like precise relationships, and like what they talk about seems to be like, it doesn't seem like they have shallow conversations.
No, it's a believable conversation that, you know, I had noticed before in either The Idiot, Crime and Punishment, Notes from Underground.
Yeah, and like I think like what those have too is like Notes for the Underground, Crime and Punishment. I haven't read The Idiot, but it's also like the way that these people are so like enmeshed in their worldview
Mm-hmm.
that like their dialogue is filtered through like their ideology or just like their sense of order in the universe.
It's like it's trapped up in it.
But yeah, do you want to move on to the mask?
I think it's probably about time.
Speaking of trapped up characters,
Yeah, I like this one a lot better, personally. Say that right off the bat.
I'm waiting to see how the conversation goes. Like looking back, like Repair Reputations is like it feels like a throwaway joke at first, but it's pretty dense with details. Like even the joke is good.
Yeah. I think we've been able to tease a lot out of it, but I bet, I don't know, I just feel like there's so much more per page in the mask, I feel. But maybe that's just my initial... I guess we'll see as we discuss. But, anything else? Any other introductory thoughts?
I like both. I find them kind of hard to compare. Tonally, they're just so different.
Right. That's certainly true.
I like the story a lot. It's like more local, smaller stakes, but it's you get invested in the mask, right? All right, yeah. Do you want to go ahead and summarize it?
Yeah. I'll try to keep it brief. So I think it sort of opens well, I guess first of all I should mention it opens with another quote from The King in Yellow, the play. And I really like this one. I think this one's a lot very interesting. So it's read as like a play. There's dialogue between two women and a stranger. That's Camilla and Casilda, and then an unnamed stranger. So the first line, Camilla says, "You, sir, should unmask," and the stranger says, "Indeed." And then Casilda says, "Indeed, it's time. We all have laid aside disguise but you." And the stranger says, "I wear no mask." And then Camilla, I guess, turns to Casilda and says in a terrified voice, like, "No mask, no mask." Yeah, I really like that. I think that's swag. It's based. Anyway, I think that's just so. I also think though that it like echoes something Poe did. I can't remember the story, but is it the Mask of the Red Death where there's nothing under the mask? You know what I mean? Is the bit in that? But I can't remember. It's been a while since I read Poe.
That sounds right.
But yeah, it's the one that's like a metaphor for the Black Plague or something like that. But I can't. I don't even
that one
remember.
is the Mask of the Red Death.
Is it?
Yeah.
Isn't it like there's a guy at the what is it, the masquerade? Is that not the same kind of?
Yeah. No, I'm remembering it now where they see the guest that wasn't invited or something, or they realize something weird, and Yeah, they go to unmask him.
Okay, I guess this has a similar vibe. Just this little quote at the beginning. It's weird to pick this apart so much, but it hit like a bullet. So I wanted to, I guess, spend a minute on it.
Yeah, it's a neat,
Um,
like, it makes you wonder, like how that would be set up in the story, but it is like a scary moment, like this idea that someone would be expecting a mask and there isn't. Also makes you wonder what they're seeing, what
right.
kind of face they're looking at.
I thought the mask reference in this poem felt more psychological, not necessarily psychological, but more like communicative. What face are you going to carry with this group of people
I mean, in the story.
Oh,
in the opening poem?
okay. So you
Was
took it
my
as more
first
like
thought.
psychological than like literal. Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess I just immediately viewed like a masquerade, but I could see how that would make sense too.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine the context. A masquerade makes sense, or is it like some kind of rendezvous? Like we have all laid aside disguise, but you.
Yeah, that's true too. Like it's a heist and everybody takes off the mask at the end, but then one of them is just exactly what they appear.
And the other thing that's spooky is that in Repair Reputations, they talk about how about the nature of the King in Yellow being this thing that drives you crazy, but is like this has a sublime beauty that like draws people in. How there's no like rule
Right.
broken, and that the first act is much more normal before the second act really hits you.
Yeah, yeah. No, I remember that vividly.
And um, the 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 little segment that they pull out for in the mask is from scene 2 of Act 1, and that's like already like a pretty chilling kind of scene. So it makes me also wonder like what happens in Act 2 in Act 2.
I wonder if we're ever gonna get a quote from Act Two. It would be neat to just glimpse into that window, but I don't think we have one. I guess I was sort of imagining it as like a kind of like end of Evangelion kind of jump from whatever the first act is, where it's like, oh, okay, so this is all exists in the realm of the metaphorical anyway. So just
Yeah, things could really
disregard
go.
this being a play, right?
But then, I mean, ultimately, whatever mask stuff we get in the story ends up being like what Corbin was saying, just straight up more psychological. Like, definitely not as intense, or intense in a different way, anyways.
it was still pretty
That's
intense.
definitely true. All right, should I just get into it? All right.
Yeah, yeah.
So the story begins with kind of like a cold open. We're like left. It starts with the line, Although I knew nothing of chemistry, I listened fascinated." So we're in the middle of a chemistry lecture immediately, you know.
Hmm.
And what it is more of like an alchemy lecture, literally anyway. But I guess it was 18 whatever when he wrote this. So what's being done is living things or organic material are being converted into like marble sculptures, um, you know, through the dropping of them into like a solution, which then flashes gold, and then
And it
and
makes
then
a
they're
light.
plucked from the solution in that moment. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that I guess the light is the indicator that it's safe to grab it out of there. Which I don't know why tongs aren't just the default for this, but
I was
regardless,
wondering about that.
um, I think that would be like a common thought. Don't though; it ruins the suspension of disbelief.
There were no tongs in France at this time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tongs is not a French concept. Um, but anyway, so we're sort of introduced then to like the larger context of what's happening beyond this sort of experiment we're seeing, and what we find is like a narrator whose name I actually don't remember for some reason. Do we have his name?
We'd get his name
Um,
later.
is it Alec?
Alec, yes.
Alec. Yeah, Alec. Okay, so we have our narrator Alec, who's a painter, I believe,
Hmm.
and he's involved in sort of like a small community of artists. Clearly, the person he's speaking to, who's conducting this experiment, is a sculptor named Boris, who, you know, he is, I guess, renowned in this time period in France. He's done really good carving of, I think, the Madonna is his recent carving, his sculpture that has done numbers, if you will.
Yeah, they hit at the salon.
And for this, his girlfriend and roommate, I guess, has sat in as the Madonna, as the model for the sculpture. And her name is Genevieve. So those are sort of the three central characters, in addition to like a fourth peripheral guy named, like, what was it? Jack something? Jack Scott, I think.
You got it.
So what we find is that Alec and Boris and Genevieve all have sort of quite a bit of respect for each other. In spite of that, there's definitely like a love triangle going on, And the situation seems to be that Alec has sort of respectfully he respects that Genevieve has chosen Boris over him. And, because he's Boris's friend, there's an understanding there, a commonality, and they just respect it and do what they do, which is a lot of art, evidently. It sounds kind of dope. But it should be noted, Boris, this famed sculptor, he goes into, fascinated as he is with these experiments, with this solution that converts things into marble, he makes a separation between that and his actual work, and they don't really cross at any point. But we're told he's working on a sculpture of the Fates that's kind of unfinished, and something else that kind of sucks or something. I can't quite remember. So he had, they have this sort of like weird relationship with each other, where they all hang out in this house and get up to nonsense in the swimming pool and in the house, whatever it is. But at one point, Boris almost dunks Alec in the solution, and this really presents like at this point, what's that concept? Is it Chekhov's gun? Is that what I'm thinking of? Yeah. At this point, it's clear somebody's going in the solution. You know what I mean? Sooner or later. Yeah. And for some reason he's keeping all of this in a swimming pool, or what I envisioned was sort of like a small bathing pool or something, almost like a hot tub size.
Yeah.
In his like bathing room, and that seems like a bad place to keep it. And I think that's even commented on at one point. But as the story continues, they do like more and more kind of whack experiments on this with bigger and bigger animals, like, what I mean, goldfish and rabbits, and then at some point, I believe it is, Genevieve falls a little ill, right? And this sort of changes the story's pace, because of this, you have a lot of like nervous standing around on the part of the other three characters, And at some point during this, the narrator, Alec, picks up and reads the King in Yellow, right?
When that comes out.
Interestingly, this seems... right, yeah.
But it's like he picks it up and he's like, well, I'm done with this. Like, he doesn't actually, like, dive in. Like, it's a weird red herring.
Yeah. Well, I question that, but we'll get into that. But so then he kind of comes down with a fever, and he's sick for quite a while, I think, right? Like, there's no other reason that he's sick, if I recall correctly. He just gets sick, right? When he's sick, he has a lot of like really trippy kind of madness dreams about Carcosa and all that. And at one point, he swears he dreams Boris hanging over him, sort of like leaning over him, whispering something, some message of... I took it as positive, some kind of, essentially like comforting him, is how I took it. He wakes up later to his buddy Jack Scott kind of just hanging out in that room, And, he's not well enough to see anybody or do anything, so it takes him a couple weeks to even recover beyond that point. But at that point, he finds out from Jack that Genevieve and Boris are, I guess, both dead, And it turns out that, I guess at some point in her sickness, Genevieve went and got in that swimming pool full of shit that you shouldn't get in the swimming pool full of. The magic alchemy juice have turned you into a sculpture, which causes Boris to then, and probably rightfully so, I mean, Jesus, it seemed like a bad decision to have this stuff in a pool.
Yeah.
Kills himself. Yeah. this sets off like a, hearing this is not great for Alec, because it should be mentioned they were all really young, you know what I mean? Like, they were all in their, like, early 20s. I guess back then that meant more in terms of, like, how old you really were. But, right. So I think it ends up being somehow, like him and Jack end up in control of all of their affairs, you know what I mean? Like, the house, the money, the sculptures, So, Alec decides to travel a bit because he can't really hang out in that house. He's a little too tore up about it. And it should be noted, Genevieve's body, the marble carving, has not been buried. It's just been, left in the sculpture room under the Madonna, which is also her, I think is interesting. But... So at one point, dude returns from his travels to find that his friend Jack is increasingly nervous about something. And it's this classic kind of insanity we felt from the last story. Like, dude is real anxious about some kicking yellowy shit, It's apparent just immediately. But we never get to it because Alec kind of ends up going back home and he just becomes accustomed to living there, and he decides that he's going to go check on Genevieve's body one day after, some enormous amount of time of not going in that room. He goes in and he kisses her, on the lips because she's just a sculpture. And then he's hanging out reading or something, and the servants start telling him, oh, we found a goldfish. Oh, we found a living rabbit. And he's, being a big dum-dum, and he doesn't realize what this means. And then finally it clicks with him, and he goes running into the other room, and there's Genevieve waking up from death. And that's the story. There's a lot more to it to pry out, I think, but that's the bigger, the arc of it.
Yeah, there's some stuff at the edges, because, first the servant comes in when he's at the house, and gives him a message from Jack that says, don't leave the house. So he's doing something very important, but I guess he has to send a message first, and then the servant sticks around, and he's not sure why, and then the servant just says that there's a white rabbit that they don't know what to do with, and he's just let it go free. But it leaves the initial thing with the letter doesn't get followed up on him. It makes you wonder, where is Jack's urgency being pointed at?
We're left with this uncomfortable anxiety because things are suddenly looking a lot better, but at the same time there's this unresolved tension. You know what I mean? Whatever happy ending the story has in terms of her waking up and him being what's his face is dead and she probably loves me second best, right? So hey, that's first now. Whatever happy ending you could try to wring out of that is sort of marred by whatever's going on with Jack,
Yeah.
Yeah, our anxiety as readers, and also Jack's, relates to Boris ultimately. I think we got that much from Jack.
Yeah, Jack sticks around in France while Alec goes off to Asia, and then they connect by telegram because Alex, you gotta come here.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if Jack is there. I wonder if he stuck around and dug into Boris's affairs.
Well, so I thought it was a dream relating to a conversation that Alec and Boris were having, and Jack just couldn't remember what that dream content was besides that.
Oh yeah, and Jack
he was also deeply disturbed when Alec told him that Boris had stood over his bed in fever dream because he was already dead. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he brings it back. He brings it back up again later, when the marble thing is imminently gonna be undone.
So do you think, he knows something then, is the implication? But then what could he know,
I don't... Yeah, something to do, because, it's not quite science. I know that, science and spiritualism was more mixed at this time.
Yeah.
But there's that thing with the light. Yeah, in the solution, and there's also the aspect of it that like all these marble things were made, you know, within, at least a few days of each other. Like the lily that gets dunked at first, the goldfish, the rabbit, and Genevieve. Oh, Genevieve might have been
Right.
within hours. No, days. Uh, but
Yeah.
they all get undone. Like, well, I guess we don't know the full timeline, but it seems like they get undone like closer together than they get made.
It seems pretty contemporaneous of each other, almost real time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard not to tie it to him kissing her in that like really simple like Sleeping Beauty kind of way though. Though I never got the sense that that was all there was, but like it's just my first thought was like, oh, was it the kiss? Like what was the action?
I had some kind of image of Jack like digging up Boris's grave or something, but I'm not sure what he would have done with that. It does operate on this sort of just like a lovely miracle that happens.
Yeah.
I had this other thought that who like maybe like no, never mind. I was gonna say like maybe it's just King in Yellow induced madness, but with the servants responding to it too.
Right.
Well, don't limit the King in Yellow.
Well, I think
it'd be a dark read though.
So I wanted to ask if you thought that the fevers, like the two fevers, were tied to the King in Yellow. Like, do you think that the book is in some way associated with both of them falling sick? Because wasn't there some behavioral weirdness from Genevieve before she fell sick?
Yeah, there's a moment where she comes in and she like acts like he's a stranger.
Right.
And then a little bit later, she like comes back to her senses.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what we're supposed to make of that either. There's a lot of ambiguity, I guess, in both these stories, but I wasn't sure if somehow the King in Yellow played into that. Like the book is there, and it does seem to be the thing that, other than Genevieve, that seems to be the thing that Alec engages with, like closest to him getting sick. Yeah. And then he has all these dreams about it. So I part of me like wondered if Genevieve had gotten into the book too at some point, and they were just both being influenced by it indirectly, and that's just supposed to be like the cryptic hint we take from it. But again, there's always that ambiguity with Chambers, evidently.
Yeah,
so.
And there's that thing where like, what's that book even doing there too? Like,
yeah, because this is like a science and sculpture guy,
Yeah, so is that Genevieve's interests? Or like is it like the ring in Lord of the Rings which just shows up in places, like it somehow wills itself to be in different areas?
Could be of interest to Boris.
Well, I know we're told that that Jack destroyed all of Boris's like records and that. My impression was that Boris was just broadly into sort of like occulty things, right? Like if he was finding like alchemical solutions in the first place, you know what I mean? Like he was probably like a little bit on those fringes.
Yeah,
but he didn't at any point seem right that science hadn't known about it. But he didn't seem like insane in that way. Like if the King in Yellow immediately brings madness, I think the only one with any like behavioral disorder at any point seems to. Well, I guess both Alec and Genevieve exhibit some of it.
Yeah, maybe it's more of a thematic thing where Boris is just this curious guy, but he's like, he's smart. He knows when to stick his hand in on the thing.
Right.
So he's working on that.
That's
and
true.
That brings Genevieve's downfall, at least temporarily. And he has this book, and he might have accidentally, caused psychic harm to Alec, even if it doesn't like play into the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like he just like leaves these things out, like as an artist and scientist, he doesn't realize like the effect that he's having on the people around him.
Oh yeah, the implication of just leaving, like a book around that like drives people mad.
Or a pool of alchemy solution that turns any living thing to marble.
Oh, I'm gonna.
That's a pretty insane decision.
But he,
hey, He didn't have anything else big enough for a rabbit.
Right, he wanted to put more complex things. Like he was pulled into this dangerous thing, even though he knew it was unwise. Like he wasn't gonna share it because, like, even for art purposes, it wasn't like he thought it was gonna do more harm than good.
Right, like photography had done to painting. I think Alec had said.
I just thought of something else too. Going back to Repair of Reputations, they're talking about the King in Yellow because the Hildred has Napoleon books and King in Yellow, and he has a little conversation with Lewis, and they're saying something like, and they're talking about it and say, I heard he shot himself, and Hildred says, my understanding is he's still alive, and Hildred says,
Wait,
Oh, wow.
wait,
Oh, no.
Napoleon?
Way.
No. The writer of the King in Yellow.
Oh.
And then Lewis is like,
Wait, that occurs?
yeah, they have a conversation.
So do
It's
we
a
think-
scene where he's looking, like, where Lewis catches him wearing the crown.
Oh shit!
And then Lewis is like, I suppose a bullet isn't enough to kill a fiend like him.
Are we to think maybe Boris wrote
Damn,
this
did
book?
Boris write the King in Yellow?
He could have been a playwright.
Right.
He seemed like a yeah.
Well, I mean, it seems like he might have survived a gunshot. Like,
Right, like it's a fun parallel, even if he didn't write
Oh,
it.
yeah.
I like this idea that the King in Yellow, like, brings out this, like, you know, like this hidden, like, supernatural element in reality, you know, and like in circumspect ways.
mhm.
Because yeah, like that pool, like, it's, you know, like, this story is even more fantastical than Repair of Reputations, where you have maybe the knowledge of Hobberk's and Constance's past. We have maybe the knowledge of the pieces of the armor, but otherwise it's just
Mhm.
like, you know, a couple of guys operating in a weird heightened state.
Right.
But here, like, that heightened state gets taken to the point to the level of people going in and out of marble states.
Yeah, that's true. I like the way he says it at one point, like when he's sort of distracted by Genevieve's sickness and he's sort of troubling on it, like he's having some thoughts, and then all at once he's like, "Oh, you want to see my liquid pool of death?" And to me, that is like a very that was a very relatable way of coping with anxiety. Do you know what I mean? He was like, "You want to check out my cool new toilet?" Like, you know? But I don't know. Yeah, that one was good too. I still think I like that story better. I don't know why. I don't know. It felt I don't know. The concepts in it felt newer to me than Guy Goes Insane a little bit. I think we've managed to tease a lot out of Repair of Reputations, but I don't know that. I still think I like The Mask better.
Yeah, I think I guess I appreciate Repair Reputations makes more sense as a first story than The Mask would be.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think I can agree there.
And
That's
to
fair.
the degree that they're connected, it's interesting, like the setup that helps provide, just in terms of like
Mm-hmm.
the tension. Like, you see that book come up and you know something's gonna go wrong. It's not the same thing, but it immediately,
Right.
like, you know, like, makes your stomach sink a little bit.
That's kind of how, like, I feel like Lovecraft tried to do that a bit with the Necronomicon. You know, it was always on a bookshelf in some corner in his stories. You know what I mean? But it didn't carry the same weight because it's kind of just like, oh, there's the Necronomicon again.
Mhm.
It doesn't have this, like, you know, we never get a glimpse of what's really in it. You know?
Yeah, but that was it does shift things to, like, is the content of it scary? Like, is the things that it reveals scary, or, like, is it scary?
I think a little of both. I mean, the Necronomicon never really scared me much. I never was curious as to what might be in it. Though this, you get those passages like mask, no mask,
No
and you
mask.
wonder, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like, it's in terms of, like, this, like, mad allure, and it's not even right? And it's not even that it reveals something, it's more like it brings something out of you, which is a more visceral concept. Although who
Right.
knows where the other, where the second act goes.
How would you relate that sort of quote at the beginning of The Mask to like what's actually contained in the short story?
Mm. I can only think of like very like surfacey kind of things, because the mask is brought up in terms
Same.
of Alec like hiding his pain about Genevieve choosing Boris over him.
Well, he
Right. So
he constantly has a save face.
Yeah, and it's but not like
right.
not in terms of great effort, just like he says at one point the mask is a part of him, and it's like only when he's alone that it comes off.
Right.
Which is like
To me, it still sounds like there's a mask though. So,
yeah, there's
so I
definitely
don't know
a
what this
mask.
no mask business is. Right? Yeah. I don't know
Oh
what this no mask business is.
yeah, so like the direct thing, I guess, like just like to say the surfacey thing, um, like the mask coming off is a point of like terror in that
Hmm.
little bit, and yeah, the mask coming off is like the pain of rejection, of unrequited love, like actually like affecting him,
Right.
uh because it was like it seemed like the thing that they all three had together was very beautiful. Like part of why he can carry on with the mask is because he has as much, not whatever. He has love for Boris, not just Genevieve. Like they're romantic rivals, but they are great friends.
Yeah, they really are.
In a word, it's a throuple.
Well, doesn't he dream of her? Doesn't he dream of her sort of like paralleled with that wolf? You know.
Yes.
I don't know. I was having a hard time interpreting that, but like maybe it's just supposed to show her as like sort of something next to something aggressive, like something that something hostile.
And
Because
like she
I
had tripped on the wolf before, and I don't know if like it made me assume. I don't think. I guess they don't say it, but it made me assume that when she fell into the pool, it was because she tripped on that wolf head, probably.
was it? Oh gosh.
Well, they don't. They
Huh.
just say that they found her in the pool, but they had shown her trip over it before.
Right. I just wasn't sure how close these things were together. I'm imagining this like sprawling, French like mansion or something.
Yeah, like I guess like you don't even need that. Like just having her trip over the wolf would have been enough to make the association stick for him. And it's like one of the last memories he has of her. Yeah, they describe the wolf as like in like negative terms.
I can't get over it. What was Boris thinking? He's living with his girlfriend that he's aware of tripping over this wolf before. And I
He almost threw Alec in, like he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna throw you in," and then he stops.
oh yeah, he's like, oh, I almost forgot.
How do you forget that?
Yeah, I that was such an obvious Chekhov's gun. I was like, okay, somebody's going in there, huh?
I mean, it was definitely Chambers playing with us. Like, is it gonna be Alec? No, no.
I knew it was coming for her.
Once she got feverish and in that delirium, and
Yeah, I was wondering if it was gonna do something like she drank some of it
Ooh.
when she was sick. I was wondering, it's like, oh, what if she had like a partial exposure or something?
maybe, frankly, I thought Boris was gonna snap.
Oh, and push her in or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
or had finally, realized, oh, I can make the perfect Madonna with this.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like it would have been really easy to do that kind of narrative, but I'm kind of glad that they didn't. Like,
but there was room for that. Like,
right?
because what's the King in Yellow doing there?
Yeah.
Like that could have been what happened, right? That's one version of how things could have gone. Is that Boris reads the King in Yellow, or like the King in Yellow gets to him, He throws her in. Like this, I guess there's even room for it. It doesn't feel right to the story, but there's even room for it, I guess. Where in his madness he throws her in, realizes what he's done, shoots himself in the chest.
Right. But that's not what we get for some reason. It's I think it's better for that.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like with what we get, Alec had done something. Like how reliable is his conveyance of what he did during his fever is.
Yeah, it seemed like he wasn't able to move. Like there's definitely room in terms of like we don't know how this book can affect you, but it seemed like he was like bedridden, and we have the what's his name,
Jack.
Yeah, Jack Scott there, who was like taking care of him.
I wonder what would the first time he fell asleep on that couch in the smoking room.
That's when he reads the.
That's when he reads.
That's when he reads The King in Yellow. You think that there's like some doubt thrown in? You think maybe he got deeper into The King in Yellow madness?
Well, I think it's like I don't know. You know what I mean? So like if you smoke a cigarette, you're not addicted to cigarettes, but that cigarette was still really bad for you.
Oh, just in terms of how much he read, how much that would have affected him? Like even if it wasn't the whole thing?
Yeah, because he just got a fever. Right. Like maybe that's what's being demonstrated is that it's kind of like how much exposure do you have to this thing, like almost like it's radioactive or something, you know?
Yeah. Because he still has those dreams, and he says like he thought of the King in Yellow in the Pallid Mask. God, all those descriptions, like, they really make you want to take a look at that King in Yellow.
Well, and I'll tell you what, I'm glad he doesn't do what Lovecraft does, where he just, like, hits it way too hard with, like, weird adjectives. Like, just saying the Pallid Mask is plenty, you know? Like, we don't need the undiscernible, the infinite, the...
Yeah. And there's things that return to, I think, like, a Pallid Mask or something like that. I think something like that comes up in Repair Reputations.
It did.
So, so I guess there's, like, aspects that like recur enough that it feels like a real document. The reference to tattered robes, that's so cool. Like I loved the idea of a book within a book, just like hang around the fringes. Like there's just enough. Like this story wasn't about King in Yellow. Like I guess you could pull out more if you want. There is this spooky kind of quality about it, but it shows up for a little bit, and it just like gives this little. Just gives a drop of flavor to everything else.
It's just this little variable in this longer, I guess, equation going on. I appreciate it for that too. I agree.
But but the overall main course, like it is a neat flavor. I do like the sort of fairy tale romance aspect of it too. Like outside of King and Yellow, if we had just read this story, it'd be a nice little story.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's really fitting with the. I like the aesthetic of it a lot. I think that soft but also dark vibe is sweet.
Mm-hmm. Like the beautiful sadness of like these like perfectly rendered marble sculptures.
Yeah, what was it? Their hearts kind of glow red, and then their veins kind of glow blue, even while they're marble. I guess that should have been the surest sign that they were going to pop back to life eventually, but I didn't. I was like, oh wow, that's trippy.
Yeah, and the way, maybe just in the telling of it, or just in terms of it's such a fantastical thing that you're just gonna believe what you hear anyways. Like you don't say, well, I know, like it's not something you know for a fact about people turned into marble.
Right. I think marble does have streaks of blue in it, does it not? So I was like, oh, it's interesting how that's like an actual component of marble, and like something that you could write in this way.
It does come out pink too. There's like there are colors to like mined marble. It's not this pure white.
Even within the story, the room is described as pink marble.
Oh,
except for the floor, which is like white and gray.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like so. It's something you can easily imagine too. Where so this thing also makes that blue thing, those blue lines you see in marble sometimes. They happen to something about veins makes them come out that way.
So, did you guys have any final thoughts on the books we read, the stories?
Well, I'll say one final thought. I think we talked about it before, but I'm glad we read these as a pair, especially the mask. Maybe just because of the order, but I'm glad it wasn't a standalone. I feel like the stories do talk to each other.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Now that I think about it, like not even just because of King in Yellow thing, there's also like weird love triangle in both.
Yeah, though it's way less mutual in the first one. Yeah, it's way less mutual in the first one.
I mean, what's her name? Constance in the first one?
Yep.
I mean, she cried tears over the crazy guy.
More just because he was insane, I thought, than because she loved him. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like Constance was definitely not as much of a character as Genevieve was. Like
For sure.
yeah, like I'm sure like a big part of it is just the shock of the night, but yeah, there's definitely affection for him, even if it isn't romantic.
I guess it's just hard because she's so much less involved in.
Yeah, it's hard to see her motives. I don't know.
Yeah, the mask I guess leans more into it. Like they are a throuple, and that story, that romance story, I can see Chambers' future in this one. But the idea,
good.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
I
actually thought it was very sweet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the idea, like this throuple, this perfect trio that's held together by. There's also like a tragedy to it, where they're held together by this love going unspoken, and then by coincidence things unravel right after, or not coincidence, destiny. Who knows?
It's kind of like there is no mask, because that throuple love that they have is super obvious. It's weird that by the time it's said that causes a break, because everybody's aware of what's going on. There is no mask. I think in finality, I think that's correct.
I will say, I mean, this is still a relatively early work for Chambers, but I'm not sure Lovecraft is fair in his critique of Chambers.
Yeah,
when he's like a smart guy that never took his writing to full ability or took it in the wrong direction.
Yeah, maybe like he just doesn't appreciate his ability to write these gentle love stories. The story, I don't know if you want to stay on this Chambers thing for next week. The story that Lovecraft actually mentions from Chambers is the Yellow Sign. So if we read the next two stories, then we'd hit that.
Sounds like a plan. I'd be interested to see what the next two stories kind of push into.
Well, that was Repair of Reputations and The Mask.
Certified fresh.
Absolutely.
No reservations, thumbs up for me, both of these stories.
Yeah, I liked them a lot.
Especially together, they hit so perfectly.
Yeah, and The Mask is also a nice palate cleanser for the uncomfortable tragedy of Repair of Reputations.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
Like a more beautiful type of tragedy, which has this nice transcendent happy ending, or qualified happy ending.
Happier
ending.
I still felt bad about Boris. Maybe he survived that gunshot.
Yeah.
Now that you mentioned that connection, in which case it is definitely a happy ending.
I think there's some evidence he might have. I don't know. I guess we'll never know what Jack Scott was so upset about.
What was he up to?
Right.
Oh, that's so cool. So I think that's it for Repair of Reputations and The Mask. Join us next week. We're definitely going to be jumping back into Robert Chambers in the future.
Right.
You know it.
So this has been... forgot the name of our own show. This has been Pleasant Evenings Book Club. Signing out. My name's Roberto.
This is Corbin. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
Until next week.
Till next week. Don't forget to subscribe, whatever we decide to do,
And like.
Follow.
and like.
Yeah. Engage with us on the internet.
Do we have socials yet?
No.
Awesome.